Good afternoon. My name is Dan Gilman. I have the pleasure of serving as Chief of Staff for Mayor William Peduto, and it is truly my honor to welcome everyone here today on this momentous day for the city of Pittsburgh. I want to thank our guests in the room from Moms Demand Action, Ceasefire, spiritual leaders, community leaders, and public safety who have stood by the side of City Council and the Mayor and the people of Pittsburgh as we've said enough is enough to gun violence in our communities. Today is about taking a step, one step in a journey to eliminating the gun violence that plagues our synagogues, our schools, our mosques, our churches, and our street corners in neighborhoods across this city. For too long, we have answered to special interests instead of answering to the safety of the people of Pittsburgh. And overwhelmingly, the people of Pittsburgh have spoken out to say enough is enough, that we truly are stronger than hate, and we'll show that by eliminating the violence that plagues our city, that takes away sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews far too soon every month in the city of Pittsburgh. And I want to thank our city council members who are here, who had the courage to vote for this tremendous package of legislation that speaks to the violence in our communities. 4 bills, one around assault rifles, one around special ammunition, extended clips, and different additions to guns that make them even more deadly in the hands of criminals. The 3rd bill, an emergency risk protection order, a red flag law, and the 4th, a stop the violence that extends the work we do with our communities every day to improve police-community relations and to address the violence in our neighborhoods. And with that, it's my honor to introduce the Mayor of the City of Pittsburgh, William Peduto.
Thank you, Dan. It's my honor to sign these 4 bills. And first I have to thank the council members who were courageous and heroic in pushing to make sure that they passed. There was a lot of opposition, and I think most people know that. But more people within the city quietly showed their support. And for those folks who were behind this council in order to take that heroic step, I want to say thank you. Many of the community leaders are here. Some of them work within gun reform organizations. Some of them run churches. Some of them have been at the forefront of social justice for decades. Some aren't even 2 decades old. It was a community coming together in order to say enough is enough. We are going to take action. We are going to do something positive, and it is going to be everlasting. And yes, we'll take on the challenge, but that's how you change things. Change doesn't happen on its own. Change only happens when you challenge the status quo. And for decades, we have tried to get that change through Harrisburg. We have tried to get that change through Washington. And we have taken steps backward, not forward. So what we're saying is, in communities across this state, in townships and boroughs and in cities, we will take action. In cities around this country, we will take action, and we will demand that action to be taken by the state and the federal authorities. And yes, we'll take on lawsuits, because lawsuits are the action of the gun manufacturing lobby. They threaten anybody who would dare have a voice in what and how guns are to be used in our society. In what industry does the industry dictate the rules and not the people? And yes, our residents have a constitutional right to life. And that outweighs a gun manufacturer's right to profit. The 4 bills are now law. We've been told throughout this process that they would be going to the district attorney to file charges. That is their constitutional right, and if they choose to do it, we will challenge the law itself that would prohibit an elected official from ever challenging a law. I would say on the basis of it, it is not only unconstitutional, but it's un-American.
And Bill, those gun rights advocates did indeed file that lawsuit electronically over common police court even before you'd signed the legislation. You prepared for this legal battle?
Sure.
I mean, they're Firearms Owners Against Crimes followed.
Council is represented by legal counsel, and as of this morning, I am as well.
They claim that municipalities under the state law don't have the authority to regulate guns.
The very concept that the state could create a law that would say that elected officials who challenge the validity of that law would somehow be held to criminal charges goes against everything in every proactive step forward that this country has taken. If we didn't challenge laws, women would not have the right to vote. If we didn't challenge laws, the civil rights movement would never have happened. If we didn't challenge laws, we would never have eradicated slavery. The very idea that the state would criminalize the challenge of laws goes against democratic participation of elected officials. So what we're going to do is we're going to overturn this law. And then we're going to overturn this law in Florida. And then we're going to overturn this law in other states. And legislative bodies at the municipal level will be talking about guns because, unfortunately, our state capitals in Washington have been bought by the gun manufacturing lobby, who has decided that they and they alone should write the laws about guns in our society.
What do you want to tell taxpayers who are concerned about expensive lawsuits?
Number one, we will be represented by Everytown, a national organization that will be putting a team of lawyers in place for us. They have offered their services to the city of Pittsburgh. There may be some ancillary costs, but I would say that if the laws that this council has passed save one life, those ancillary costs are minimal.
Mayor, could you talk about some of the people who were behind you here today when you signed this legislation into law? It looked like you had a number of...
There were members of the three congregations from the Tree of Life. I don't want to discuss too much because they're still going through mourning, and I just wanted them, as well as members of the public who have been pushing for gun reform for decades, to be here, to be a part of this. We don't only see gun violence occurring in places of worship. We see it occurring on street corners, in a living room with a stray bullet that takes an innocent honor student's life, a stray bullet in the hilltop communities that takes a grandmother away from her family. And we know that the capacity of these guns, not simply the amount of bullets they can hold, but the volume with which they hit a human body, is something that doctors will tell you they can't sew, they can't fix. And by the time a police officer gets onto that scene, we've already lost that life. They cause a vacuum, these bullets. Their cause is not accidental. They have one purpose: to eliminate people from a battlefield. And if you think that that is an appropriate or needed element in an urban environment, you are very, very wrong.
This legislation, a lot has been talked about with the lawsuits. Do you see it as an attempt also to influence legislators in Harrisburg, to put pressure on them to change the existing state law as it exists?
Without a doubt, and we're already seeing it. There are several states now in several cities that Everytown is representing that are challenging the laws that we are challenging as well. And what we saw on Friday, the Supreme Court not hearing the argument when the Trump administration banned bump stocks. The Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican from South Carolina, saying that every part of the Constitution is amenable, meaning that is code for saying that the Second Amendment can be amended. And Senator Graham stating that he would support red flag legislation, the very laws this council wrote, that says that when a person is threatening to harm themselves or to harm somebody else, their family members or law enforcement will have a legal right to go to court through due process to temporarily remove those weapons while they get the mental health help they need. And we're seeing that traction now in a bipartisan effort. The bill that Congress passed for violence against women had 33 Republican votes, even though the NRA said they would punish anyone who voted for it. It's now before the Senate, and it takes away those weapons in the same way that this council did. Bipartisan support is building because cities and states are challenging the law.
More specifically, with regards to state laws in Pennsylvania, everyone, they make note of the red flag law that says municipalities should not have the right, or they are not allowed to create their own gun laws. Is it your intention or hope that that particular law is amended or overturned?
Well, I don't believe that we should have preemption laws that are supported and written by special interest groups. It's not a coincidence that you see the preemption laws existing for guns in state after state. They were created by the NRA in order so that their ability to sell guns would never be interfered with. It's purely for profit, and I think that that law needs to be challenged, but the challenge itself will be left up to our attorneys.
Do you want to make a comment about how Pittsburgh will basically be the first municipality to have a red flag law? It's taken off in 14 states, but this is like the first city to have that.
Well, it would be wonderful if there was support coming out of Harrisburg in order to be able to join what I would say within the next year or two will become a national law, but if there isn't an ability or there isn't a willingness to happen out of Harrisburg, it becomes necessary for us to protect our people and the people that we represent in any way possible, including challenging existing preemption laws that would try to take that right away from us. The constitutional right to live outweighs any other right. And when the ability to live is hampered because of the caliber of weapons that are being used in our streets, then we have to take action. And I'd just like council members also to have an opportunity to speak. I can't say enough about the courage that they put on. When you sit at that table and you have someone standing 5 feet away from you, it's very different than sitting at a table signing a piece of paper. And they never back down. Not one of them. They stayed true to their course, and they had a very difficult course to row. So, council members?
I'd like to ask a general question. Have
Yeah.
you guys been threatened? You're threatened over these bills? I heard something the other day that there may have been threats issued towards council members who supported this.
I had a death threat. I know the mayor got a couple as well. I can't speak for other members. That was a couple weeks ago. I think the only threat over the last couple weeks were criminal charges, but I think everybody here said basically, you know, bring it on because we're doing the right thing. So we're willing to fight for our residents, and I don't think anybody's going to stop us.
Corey, can you talk about how the Tree of Life kind of sparked all of this? And then you had these family members here today.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of emotional for us. You know, most of them I grew up with either them or their kids. A couple of the victims I knew as well. So I think when something hits home like that, and we've seen for decades that nobody steps up and does something. And, you know, if we would have done this, not just us, but the country would have done something 5 years ago, you know, who's to say what would have happened? I mean, people still have hate and they could still do damage. But I think for us, it was very emotional. And I think Council President Kraus, the day of the vote, said, you know, people were speaking from beyond the city saying good work and keep up the good fight. And I think that's what, you know, propelled us to get through this fight, no matter what anybody else said.
And we also acknowledge that there's been gun violence affecting our cities and our residents for decades now. The Tree of Life shooting might have been a tipping point that allowed us the opportunity and what we consider, I think, the freedom to push the boundaries when it comes to what we feel comfortable doing legislatively and legally. But I mean, that's not to say that there hasn't been violence affecting our communities and our neighborhoods for decades now, and we're all too well aware of that. So it's, yes, this helped us reach a tipping point where this is now a possibility in our this was now a possibility in our minds, but you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that the lives that were lost because of what you might call everyday or the neighborhood violence aren't meaningful as well. Those lives matter too.
And can Rev answer that, because that's one
So I have, my council district, we've lost over 500 lives, in the city, over 500 lives since I've been a member of council. And I've talked to Erica, the mayor, and Corey, who's my close friend, we united stand against all acts of gun violence, whether they be homicide, suicide, domestic-related violence, mass shootings, or even police-involved shootings. All gun violence we want to eradicate and stop. There was someone shot in Lamar yesterday, right? And so this fight continues, right? Is not isolated to any one community or any one group of people. I got a call. I wasn't going to share this. I'll share this. I got a call at my office, and a guy who didn't like my vote on the guns, he started off by telling me about Supreme Court precedents and telling me that I was not upholding my office. And so he wouldn't let me, it wasn't a dialogue, so I simply listened. I didn't say anything. And at the end of the conversation, when he asked me if I was still on the phone, I didn't say anything. But he thought I had hung up on him. And so he switched from talking about gun violence to racial hatred and bigotry. And so I think hatred against any nationality, any group of people, diminishes all of us and diminishes our whole city. And that's why what you see here is a united stand of all of us against hate, against gun violence, no matter what it may be. And that's why the bills not only deal with the issues of weapons and of guns, but also talks about organizing our community so that we all can work together in a cohesive process to reduce or eliminate gun violence at the neighborhood level.
I was wondering if any of you could provide a point of clarification as to the enforcement of these laws. Are they able to be enforced at this point, or because of the lawsuits, is it sort of put on hold? I just sort of clarify.
So that would be a legal question if they already took us to court, but the bills have dates when they become effective. So the two bans don't become effective until 60 days. The extreme risk protection is 180 days from, obviously, today.
And the fourth bill we're already doing.
Yeah, the fourth bill's already done.
The fourth bill we've already been operating. The Stop the Violence Steering Committee has already been meeting over the last 4 months. We've been meeting monthly. I'm sorry.
And then can you explain that, Bill?
Sure. The fourth bill, and I'm grateful to be able to partner with council and the mayor. And what the Stop the Violence initiative does is it coordinates all city services to reduce violence, and it has really multiple parts. But one part is a steering committee made up of the chief of police, public safety director, the mayor's office, Councilman Lavelle, and myself. We meet monthly, and what we've begun doing is taking all the initiatives that the city has to offer that has anything to do with violence reduction, especially in African American communities, and we're coordinating it and making it so it's seamless. And part of that is we're going to create a protocol. Right now, if something happens in our city, there's no there's no standard process, right? If something bad happens in our city, we have, Dr. Kennedy, Pastor Rodman, Street Baptist Church here, who has led a church-wide, various pastors to do violence reduction stuff. But there is no, right now, if something happens, he's a great ally, but there's no vehicle that tells him what's going in our city, that there's a problem, what the city's response is going to be, other than the media. And so what we're going to do is set up a formal process where our partners get to understand what's going on if there's an incident of a shooting, especially involving police, but if it's even neighborhood-based. The second part, I think that's really very important, is we've already had our first community meeting, is that we're organizing all of the community groups that either does anti-violence stuff or that wants to do it, and create a database of best practices. Our first meeting was in Larmer, and it was really well attended. I think over 50 groups were represented. And so this is going to be ongoing work, right? And then Councilman Lavelle and I, we funded the Group Violence Initiative issue $500,000 over 5 years, but we're going to the foundation to try to raise at least $1 million a year. We need to stop all violence, and we are at this moment when we are sensitive to the violence that has occurred as a city. As I said in council, we must stand together not only for that horrific incident that happened in Squirrel Hill, but we also have to stand united to reduce the violence that happens every week in our city, because every single week in our city, usually one of these black kids, young men, are shot and killed. And so we have to work together to stop that carnage, because that happens week after week after week, year after year after year.
And if I could briefly, I would just like to reinforce some of the remarks that the mayor has made. Many of you may remember, some of you may not. Back in '94, there was an assault weapons ban here in the city of Pittsburgh, and that council had the bravery to pass that. And there was not a preemption bill in the state. And so the state pushed back first after we had placed the assault weapons ban on, and then created the preemption that said we cannot do this. And so therefore that assault weapons ban was overturned. What we're doing here really is challenging the state to say we don't believe that you can do that. And we do believe that we have the right in a municipality on a local level to protect the lives of our citizenry. There's this misnomer that somehow we should stand idly by and wait for the state to act. I've been on this council for 12 years. Now Mayor Peduto, then Councilman Peduto, myself, and Councilman Shields at the time passed the, with the unanimous support of council, I would add, passed the lost and stolen piece. For 12 years we have been waiting for this state to act on the cancer of gun violence that is on our culture, and nothing has happened. I remember the day we lost a city employee that worked for our environmental services on Birmingham Street one day. He was shot and killed while on duty. And at that very moment, my state representative was in Harrisburg actually supporting and advocating for the Punish Towns bill, which would come back and punish cities for taking on these kinds of issues and trying to protect our citizenry. So this fantasy that somehow the state is going to step up and assist us with this is simply not accurate. It isn't going to happen. So I thank this council, I thank this mayor, I congratulate this council on the courage and the fortitude that it took to stand up and take a stand and simply say no more.
Any questions? Mayor, have you hired your own private, you mentioned something about counsel earlier. Have you hired your own private attorney, or is that somebody from the law?
No, I've joined with council in their representation. And I would have to talk to them.
In criminal matters.
Yeah.
We have counsel for if and when there should be criminal charges filed.
But you hired a separate attorney, or is it out of your law department?
Separate attorney.
Separate attorney. The law department will represent us, as the body, city council, in terms of passing the legislation. If, when, and should there be any kind of a criminal charge filed against us, we have private counsel.
And every town is separate in working on the legislation itself in any challenge that there would be for that.
Is that
And then
civilly,
you're-
right?
Yes.
Yeah, civil.
And then-
Yes.
And then your criminal counsel is separate from that. But
Yes.
Can you say what it is?
I don't know if we haven't, until there is criminal charges that have actually been made. At that point, we obviously would have their presence known.
But
You
you
have
have
one-
retained legal counsel.
Yes.
You retain.
Is it in one firm, or is it individual firms for everybody?
We're working with the same attorney.
Okay.
And then just to reiterate my colleague's question here, I'm not clear on whether if somebody, today decides to use their, semi-automatic weapon in public or load it in public, is that something that they
You wanna
get in
explain
trouble
the
for today, or what would the penalty be?
So there would be a penalty, but not today. When we pass laws, a lot of the time, we put an effective date on them, depending on what they are. So this one, those bills that you're talking about is 60 days from now that they would be affected if you were, again, using or doing something out in public with those specific weapons.
So what is the penalty for that, do you know?
There are fines in the bill. Yeah, because we cannot file a criminal charge on somebody from the city, so we can file citations.
Do you have any idea what the fine is?
It's up to $1,000, up to $1,000.
Can I ask another question off subject about Rob Rubenstein?
Oh.
Sure. So do you know do you know when he's stepping down and why?
Well, the board, he's basically taking his old position back, which is economic development, major projects, all the other parts of it. The HRA report should be coming out in the next few months, and there will be a restructuring of the URA at that point. The focus of what the URA will be doing will be different than major projects. We're going to focus in more on affordable housing. We're going to focus more in on main streets in neighborhoods where they haven't seen any economic growth and where blight is there. We're really going to focus in on our vacant properties and turning the opportunities from blight to home ownership. And there's a few other areas, including the new economy, where we need to add some extra emphasis. So we'll be looking for a leadership team that has experience in all of those different areas. There's no doubt that Robert has been probably one of the best experts over the past 20 years as it's come to the major developments in the city, and the URA has been built around that. We're going to now think small. To us, small is big. Micro loans and micro grant programs for entrepreneurs, seeing different neighborhoods be reborn through those entrepreneurs and fixing up those business districts, and really putting the resources into many more smaller projects than a few big. So he's been in discussions with him. He wants to stay apart and do the work that he has been doing for these decades, and we need him in that role for economic development. But the URA is being changed.
So he's not quitting, he's just...
It's not even a lesser salary, it's the same salary. It's just that his focus will be in economic development, and there will be others that will be focused in on different areas, and that will be the change that will come through the HRA report.